Seems like Marvel Legends has paid for the sin of that original Netflix figure with this redo of the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. Almost as long as it took Disney Plus to resuscitate the Netflix series, Marvel Legends has finally let the devil out by releasing their Daredevil Born Again action figures from the Marvel Legends series, specifically Daredevil and Punisher, after God knows how long they first unveiled them during a Marvel Legends live stream. Actually, I don't think it was even that. I think it was like a tease at a con of some kind. And so this one was definitely probably one of the more anticipated ones, because not only was this utilizing what a lot of people have now deemed their definitive Daredevil suit in live action, but also this gave Marvel Legends the opportunity to kind of make amends for a previous Netflix Charlie Cox Daredevil figure that they made as part of a Build-A-Figure wave of a few years back that was mostly rooted in the Season 2 look, except looking back at some images of that figure, it definitely needed some kind of revamp, some kind of improvement, because it definitely had a very weird sort of approach to the tooling, those proportions, the smirk on the face, even though they were trying to go for that smirk that he had at the very end of season 1 where he finally dons the suit for the very first time. In fact, now recalling, I feel like they kind of took broader inspiration from that look at the end of that season 1 as opposed to the actual much cleaner revisement of the suit in season 2. And therefore, the head looked a little floaty. Looking back, it probably looks a little bit more like Poindexter did when he was donning the suit in season 3. And so that's why I think this guy was definitely being on an awful lot of people's checklists. And frankly, I feel like this specific suit, despite going for certain attributions of the suit in terms of like the padding, the armaments, but at the same time going for a color hue that is very indicative of Daredevil in terms of the specific bloodiness to the red that they utilized here, I don't think it does his physique any favors, specifically around the shoulder and arm area. I think it kind of like slims him down and kind of hides an awful lot of the musculature that he atoned for. And more or less, you could argue that they went with something pretty specifically accurate here in regards to the arms. It's probably the weaker area of the arms for this Marvel Legends in terms of having this much more sleeker, slimmed down approach to it, in terms of having the arms and the elbow area being a little bit on the thinner side. The shoulders are a little bit much more pared down. But when I'm able to look past that, I gotta be honest, I'm genuinely surprised by how much I really like the suit being put in a 3D fashion here through Marvel Legends, considering that I had some trepidations going in and kind of developing this fear that they were essentially just going to take an awful lot of little factors and elements from the Hugh Jackman yellow-suited Wolverine figure from Deadpool and Wolverine and sort of retrofit him into this new Disney Plus Born Again Daredevil. There were areas specifically around the abdomen, the way that this is kind of tooled and gelled together along with the hip area and how that kind of holds the leg pieces in place, that I thought to myself, are they simply just going to take the Wolverine buck and simply just repaint him red and black with a few hues of like this jet smoky black, and then of course bring in the flesh color tone for the mouth plate? But frankly, even if they ended up doing that, I think they did a damn good job of trying to mask it as best as possible. As I got a little closer into looking at all the different like stitchings, if you will, to kind of create this illusion or this portrayal of the padding sort of separating and giving us the linings of the black, and again, like I said before, the smokier black in between, I really do like what they did here, specifically around the chest area, giving us the profound pecs along with the linings on both the underside as well as the obliques, the belt kind of clipping it all together. Everything feels pretty satisfactory, and frankly, contrary to what I felt in terms of witnessing the suit in the scenes that he actually appeared in suit in the show, which is one of my complaints, is the fact that I feel like we just didn't get enough Daredevil in that show. He was predominantly Matt Murdock with his shenanigans, especially in that bank episode. But I digress. When looking back at some of the areas that kind of connect everything together here in the back, this is probably one of my favorite areas of the figure, where they get an awful lot of this like wrinkle effect to the suit, molded and 3D printed in a way that is pretty satisfactory, in a way that I'm like, all right, if you're going to be shelving out Marvel Legends figures and maybe uptaking the price, which effectively they didn't do. They could have easily done that with this figure, considering how popular he was going to be. With the quality that's actually presented at the $24.99 price tag, I'm genuinely surprised because you could see right here that an awful lot of the presentational work to give us these like wrinkles, the texture work for the padding that legitimately feels like armor. It feels like this is a suit that could legitimately stop a knife. I'm pretty satisfied, especially when you get to probably my second favorite part of the overall suit is how they were able to mix and match so many different surface textures with the knee pads, the little bit of, I don't want to call it Kevlar. It might have been Kevlar, but whatever this black part is here towards the calves that then leads us to a much more smoother matte finish to the rubberized portions of the shoes and boots around the ankle and of course the foot area, especially with the way that they kind of printed and sculpted these little individual areas and pads and little things that are kind of lining the sides of the shoes here. It's one of my favorite little attentions to detail that I was looking at and going, God damn, Marvel Legends, you could tell that you had at least a specific team that probably spent a better chunk of the year this entire time that we were waiting for this figure to finally release and actually deliver on what you guys were promising. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely surprised that you guys were able to do this because you guys know me. I've been shitting on Marvel Legends for a good while, so to see that they were actually able to really, as the kids like to say these days, lock in, I was genuinely surprised. And I guess you can kind of carry that over a little bit more so with the head sculpt, where you can definitely see that that was probably probably the main area that they really needed to improve on that original Netflix version that was part of that Build-A-Figure wave. And you can see here that is definitively Charlie Cox's mouth plate. And that's one thing that I definitely didn't take away from Marvel Legends in the past couple of years, is that whenever they tackle some kind of live action actor's likeness to then be brought forth in 6-inch format, I don't know what kind of witchcraft or what kind of technology they got at their headquarters, but whatever it is, Hasbro definitely allocated the money to pay for it. And even if half the face is covered up here because of the cowl here that is sculpted very, very nicely in terms of like the texture work in the horns, as well as the red within the eyes, and it's sculpted in proportion very well, you have the mouth plate underneath that, I mean, I'm sorry, but this is going to sound a little strange. That is definitively Charlie Cox's chin and mouth. That is a little bit on the wider and somewhat. He has a very distinct shape to it, the way that his mouth is sort of stretched across. And I'd say that they got it pretty accurate here. So that is why it sort of pains me to call out the slight little potential QC problem that is present around the beard and facial hair surrounding that specific mouth design, because I actually do like the beard effect that is happening on his cheeks right before we meet a little bit of that hooded piece that's covering up the ears right here on the sides of his face. It's once we get to the mustache and goatee area where it looks like they were trying to do an effective job of kind of ink jetting the beard across. And for a little while, that was pretty successful, but I don't know if it's just, again, an isolated incident for my particular unit here, but you can blatantly make out the stripes cutting across horizontally from whatever that head on the inkjet printer or whatever kind of technology or kind of device they utilized to mass produce these, that left this slight little horizontal lining on that paint application, on that deco. And that's a bummer. That's a bummer to see that. It's one of those things that, like I said, it's very possible that it could just be mine. If I ever come across another Daredevil figure out in the wild, I will definitely take a very scrutinized look into the window to see if that's, again, something that is spreading across in a much more mass scale, or if it's simply just a QC problem that ended up, unfortunately, on my unit here. So if any of you finally got yours shipped in, or you managed to come across it in your hunts and you currently own the figure, let me know down in the comment section if that is also a pervasive issue that is showing up on yours. And while we're regarding the head sculpt, it's something that will then beautifully segue us into the articulation portion of the review, which is to say that there is a slight design catch-22, so to speak, here, because it's something that effectively they could have either it made it accurate to the look of the show, but then sacrificed articulation, or vice versa. And that would have to be that it is a little off-putting while pulling him out of the box, that a little bit of the neck area as well as the back portion of the head sculpt does look a little bit on the bulbous side. And I was thinking to myself as to why it is that that was happening so much. Every time I turned the head or kind of looked at it from a side profile, I was like, why does it look so strange? And that is because in the show, this is all one connected piece. It's kind of like a little hood piece that regardless of which direction he turns his head, it's always sort of stretched. So it kind of gives it a much more flat look to the back of his head and doesn't make the cowl look so bulbous and protruding from the back towards the top side right here. Whereas in figure form, because they have to make the cuts for the articulation, they necessarily had to sculpt and sort of Dremel down the neck to make it smaller than the top of this part of the head sculpt. And therefore, it's kind of lending to a little bit of this bulbous look. So it's unfortunate that that happens, but it's sort of needed to happen in order to give us what is effectively really awesome head articulation. Yeah, spoilers, but I guess in essence, I will have to lean towards favoring that design choice or that compromise, because at least it gave us what is considered to be a new standard for head articulation. I'm sorry, Marvel Legends, but you guys have done it. You guys have put yourselves in a position where if I don't see this much more frequently, you're effectively sort of undermining yourselves and kind of cutting down a little bit on the value. Because when it comes to articulation within the head, not only do you have a ball joint that allows the head to rotate 360 degrees, no problem, but also allows tilting a good amount upwards like so, and downwards like that, and even side to side, as some other Marvel Legends recently have been able to do. But if you look a little closely, when giving it much more firmer press, yes, we have a surprising neck joint at the base of the shoulders, bottom of the neck. So this piece right here that's holding this little bit of a red collar legitimately moves and can actually rotate. So I don't know if this is exactly what happened. I can't confirm nor deny this. Obviously, I'm not a fly on the wall during those meetings in terms of the design for the figure. But they actually sculpted it in a similar approach to that of like goddamn Mayfix or Figure Arts. In my opinion, just a good vote of confidence to look at Marvel Legends and go, okay, you guys actually cared about this guy. You know that this guy has been anticipated for a while. So to give us additional head and neck articulation that leans into having us be able to press and incline the head much further back, much further inwards like so, side to side, and kind of give us different expressions and tilts and leans and sort of head mobility is just a really good thing to see. And furthermore, when we move on over to the shoulders, of course, you're going to have the natural 360, slightly semi-ratcheted rotation all the way across, as well as the hinge that allows us extension off towards the sides that can actually break on through past the 180-degree angle right about right there. But if you look a little closer, you'll realize that you actually have this little washer piece that is flexing, allowing slight butterfly mobility. It could have been done a little bit better, but it's not stagnant, because we've had some Marvel Legends recently that have been culprits of limiting the mobility inside of the butterfly joint, or rather not having any butterfly joints at all. So to allow that to simply happen a few degrees with some slight shrugging motion is a really good, nice thing to see. As well as bicep rotation that allows full flexibility 360 degrees, albeit mine are a little bit on the slightly bendy side, so do be careful with them, because mine do show some signs of stretching, so you're going to have to futz with them and handle them with care. You do have pinless elbow joints, double of them right there baked in, that allows the full bicep to kind of bend all the way up like so. And then you technically do have wrist rotation via this little rod that is kind of plugged into the cuff that allows full hand rotation 360. And technically there is a slight bend to this specific hand. However, it's done in a vertical perpendicular motion, as opposed to being able to bend upwards and downwards at the wrist. So it's not matching the palm. It's kind of like side to side, kind of like a trigger hand like so. So you're going to have to do it in that manner. And to remind us that the team was actually paying attention to how much of a demand there is going to be for this character, we have a rocker for the mid-torso joint that allows full 360 rotation of the upper half of the body, as well as being able to slightly sort of crunch it inwards like so, but a good amount. It feels pretty nice, tight, and snug. And being able to extend towards the back like so. A little bit of a gap right there, but it's not as egregious as it could have been. Some slight, actually, never mind. It's just because you have to give it an extra bit of shift. But when you do give it that shift, you are able to crunch and shift it on the obliques like so. You just have to be a little bit careful with the futzing, but it could be achieved. You do have a waist cut that allows the full waist to rotate 360 degrees, no problem. However, if you're looking for extra kind of crunching or mobility, facing forwards or going backwards, you're going to have to rely more so on that mid-torso. So, but it's still a really good joint. And then when it comes to the top legs, you're able to extend the legs upwards about that far. It's not the most favorable, but not too bad either. They're pretty standard for typical Marvel Legends these days, as well as extension off over to the back like so, and then off to the side like about right there, just a little shy of the 180-degree angle right about right there. You technically do have thigh swivels. However, I did come across an issue with mine where the right one, as you can see right there, was able to rotate 360 no problem, but it was actually the left one where I did run into a slight QC problem. Like this one was definitively a QC problem. Like unlike the one on the paint application for the mouth plate, where I'm a little uncertain of, this one for sure was a really strange one, but a very present one, where this holster piece, which I'll tackle momentarily, was actually partially glued towards the back here up against the side of his leg. You can actually make out a little bit of this extra adhered piece that was molded into the plastic that I'm probably gonna have to file down with some kind of like nail filer or something to be able to get it right out of there and not make it so present. And the reason for why that's there is because that was actually holding the holster in place. It was glued on there, but I can tell it was by accident because it was only on that side, whereas the front part of this holster was completely loose and separated from this, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to give it another firm rotation of the thigh swivel. Before I sort of tore it off of this piece that was glued on by accident, I was not able to rotate the thigh swivel whatsoever. So double check your Daredevil figures to make sure that that's not present, because that was in fact included on mine. But again, an easy fix. I'm just going to have to be pulling out some kind of, like I said, nail filer or something like that to make sure that I can fix that part right about right there and not make it so ugly. But when you move on down, you do have, of course, more knee joints that are pinless and double jointed right there to allow the leg, the lower part of the leg, to flex all the way upwards. And then naturally, you're going to have the ankle joint that I'm not the biggest fan of, but at least here it feels pretty good in hand, being able to pivot the foot downwards and upwards about that far up, that far down, being able to incline it and pivot inwards and outwards right about right there. But if you're looking for a horizontal rotation, you're going to have to rely on the thigh swivel. But at least good amount of balancing. Make sure that it's flat-footed and making sure that it's not overly top-heavy on your figures in terms of the way that the poses you're going to be able to put Matt Murdock Daredevil in. But in my opinion, the highlights were pretty much the majority, actually, now that I think about it, are present in the top half of the body. But it's, again, little pieces of articulation that they didn't necessarily have to do because they've been pretty absent from their Marvel Legends for a while. So I'm really, really surprised and very pleased to see that out of all the recent MCU characters, it's actually Daredevil that gets the specialized treatment here. And it makes sense considering that not only is he a fighter, he is the devil of Hell's Kitchen, but also his dad was a boxer. So naturally, he's going to be pretty much he's pretty much going to be putting all of his upgrade points into upper body styles of fighting as opposed to his legs, even though he does have a tendency to use them from time to time, especially when facing off against the hand. But it's mostly his fists that are going to be doing an awful lot of the talking. So I'm a little bummed to see that there is one small cliche trapping that Marvel Legends does fall back upon with this version of Daredevil, and that would have to be asymmetric hands, one of which happens to be an actual fist for the right, but then an open sort of extended hand for the left. Again, at the price level, even though it could have been worse, I understand that, but there's still a part of me that wishes that it could have implemented on having double fists, double open hands, or maybe just one open hand. Keep it kind of asymmetrical still, but have two fists, one open hand, and then the default gripping hands that he came with by default. And opposed to those gripping hands that are, again, jointed in a very perpendicular sort of manner, almost similar to that of like trigger hands that only bend in this orientation, these other hand accessories that are here secondary are jointed in the opposite direction, where they actually bend going this way, kind of horizontal as opposed to vertical like so. So you do have that return to form there. I just wish that, again, we could have had two fists since he has a tendency to fight, but that's only when he's doing so with his fists. Naturally, he's also going to be utilizing his weapon of choice, which are going to be these billy clubs that also house a little bit of rope in there to be able to kind of zoom and zag and being able to use that weapon of choice not only during fighting but also during traversal. The billy clubs themselves are also very nicely sculpted in terms of the little texture work for the handle portion of the entire accessory, as well as having these like chrome bits at the end, one of which is a little bit longer than the other to kind of give it a little bit of variance. And they're made out of this like rubberized plastic, so they're a slightly bit bendy when handling them, but at least they fit firmly and nicely into his gripping hands. To me, however, there were two little details that kind of called to my attention. One would have to be that the holster that I was kind of mentioning a little bit before is cut out and form fitted to actually house the billy clubs in place should you want them to be in a natural, sort of neutral, non-combative positions. But they can go into his hands nonetheless, and as you can see right here, he looks like he's ready to throw down and looks pretty clean and nice and badass as such. But if you look at the one here on your right, his left, you'll notice that the ends are legitimately hollowed out. And for a split second there, I thought that that was simply just there for goofs. It didn't really have any sort of purpose. But lo and behold, on the side here, they did throw in the actual rope that is connecting both of the billy clubs. And it's made out of this, like, I want to say wire. It's not necessarily a bendy wire because, as you note right there, every time that I try to bend it, it kind of resorts back to this very static position. So it's kind of like this wire encased in a rubberized plastic holding it together with a nice, good, ropey texture surrounding it. But to me, the little bits that called my attention was the fact that each end does have like this little plug design to it. And so I was able to kind of put two and two together and realize that you can actually take this rope accessory and take each end and plug it into those hollow spots of the billy clubs themselves. And I gotta be honest, this is kind of neat. This is a little bit of an extra detail or functionality that Marvel Legends didn't necessarily have to implement. So now it gives the billy clubs kind of a secondary sort of function so that they have, because I gotta be honest, my first interpretation was going to be that we were going to have the one billy club loose by itself, and then the other two were going to be by default sculpted into the rope piece, and you're going to have not necessarily any sort of choice in displaying him with one or the other. You're going to have to like swap in and out, in and out, in and out. But here they went with a much more cost-effective manner of actually detaching the rope and having you kind of play around with either plugging one end in and then the other one is loose to make it look like he's throwing it, or getting rid of the rope altogether and having him sort of have the billy clubs individualized. At least I'm happy in realizing that he's got this cool compromise in the form of this sort of transformative approach to the billy club rope design that in essence kind of brings the whole package together and makes this probably one of the more pleasant surprises coming out of Marvel Legends. One that I didn't think that they were going to really hone in on, especially with how long that they were taking to release these figures. But it's cool that that patience was not misplaced. And it looks like they got effectively one of their finer MCU releases just at this tail end of 2025. And it's really weird that an awful lot of the best Marvel Legends figures just happen to be around the MCU, because in regards to some of the comic-based stuff, the retro card stuff, there's some good ones, then there's some misses, and then again, there's some just really strange collaborative decisions in the form of that Magic the Gathering bullshit. But at least in regards to what I consider to be my second favorite Marvel character, which is Daredevil, and despite my problems with the show, one of the highlights is Charlie Cox being back in the suit with a clean look at that suit, having it be predominantly red, kind of harkening back to his classic look in the comics, while at the same time being modernized with all the padding. And it's good to see that all that time spent into research was truly not wasted in giving us a really good Marvel Legends figure worthy of the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. And I guess I have nothing to fear when I give this guy a solid 8 out of 10. It's one that at the $24.99 price range, despite needing that extra fist, is still a good package deal if you truly did enjoy this suit being portrayed on screen. You want to have him in a 6-inch format that, at least for my money, looks a bit more solid and accurate than hell, even the Hot Toys one. I'm sorry, but that likeness to Charlie Cox from a company like Hot Toys is still not it. And frankly, from a budget standpoint, I would say that this is probably one that could definitely make your wish list come the holiday time this year if you're a Marvel Legends collector. One, especially if you're one like myself who's just kind of tiptoeing around certain releases that just don't speak to me whatsoever, this is probably one of the ones that you could probably make an exception for. If you guys managed to pick up your Born Again Daredevil Marvel Legends, let me know down in the comment section if you guys are enjoying it, or do you find some problems that they could have made a little bit better on, or are you looking forward to the Season 2 Marvel Legends Daredevil that's going to have that No Man's Land, I think it's called. I can't remember what the exact terminology for the specific suit is, but it's the black one with the red accents, kind of like an inverse version of this one that will finally bring us the double Ds. If you know, you know. Whatever you guys have to say, let me know down in the comment section. And while you guys are down there, hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, thumbs down if you did not. And as always, take care and stay humble.